Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I thought we would talk about some of the most unique thrillers that I've ever read. It wasn't too long ago that a viewer commented on one of my videos that they're hesitant and don't really enjoy thrillers all that much because they feel like a lot of thrillers are the same. And I definitely see that perspective. Maybe mystery thriller isn't as formulaic as something like romance is, but there are probably more thrillers out there similar to other thrillers than there are those that stand out as unique and original. I am always on the lookout for something that is unique and different, even though reading something familiar doesn't bother me. So I've compiled a list of books that I think are mystery thrillers and are fairly unique or original. Now, that's not to say that they don't share elements with other thrillers out there. It's just almost impossible to find examples of things that either aren't, plotted similarly to other thrillers or contain the same themes or contain the same types of characters. I mean, I don't know if there are any more original ideas. Some would say that there are not. So, first on this list is one of my favorite thrillers of all time. It is TheOne by John Marrs. I know I talk a lot about it on this channel, but it truly is a really great book. It is a story set in the not so distant future where a scientific breakthrough has discovered a specific strand of DNA that will match one individual with their perfect mate. And a scientist has harnessed that discovery and created a dating app. It is the future of dating, of finding a mate, of settling down. And I think that it's a pretty unique and creative concept. However, the reason that the book makes this list for me is because it's a thriller novel that has 5 different narratives. There are 5 protagonists in this book, 5 different narratives. They are not at all linked. The only thing that they share in common is that they're somehow affected by this scientific discovery and their participation in the Match Your DNA app. I know a lot of times in thrillers we'll start reading and we'll be presented with these 2 different narratives, and by the end of the book those narratives merge into each other. You realize how they're all connected if you hadn't already guessed. And one would think that TheOne is, and you might think that TheOne is set up to do that as well, but it isn't. These 5 narratives are true standalones. They're kind of like 5 different short stories based on the same premise, but chopped up and mixed together so that they alternate chapters. The book reads really quickly. It's got a lot of cliffhangers in it at the end of the chapter. As the reader, you constantly want to know what's going to happen next in the lives of these 5 people. It is really very enjoyable, and I definitely recommend it to anyone interested in a good, captivating thriller. The next book on this list is also one of my favorite thrillers. It is The Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson. This is the story of a man who has a pretty lackluster life, and he happens to meet a woman in an airport one day, and he starts telling her about his life and the not so great things, and that includes the relationship that he has with his wife. This woman concocts this plan and proposes to him that together they should kill his wife. And the story just pretty much snowballs from there. This one I wouldn't say is a super unique concept, but the way that it's executed absolutely is. Peter Swanson does something in this book that I don't see done very often. I can't tell you exactly what it is because it is quite a twist. But he does something in this book. John Marrs does it also in one of his books. And the reader is not expecting it. And once it happens, the reader is completely thrown off balance. And there's a period of time in the book where you're scrambling to figure out, like, where is this going to go now? Because it seems like this book takes such a left turn, and that makes for a super fun read as far as I'm concerned. The author does something that is risky and isn't very popular, but really pays off in The Kind Worth Killing. But the next book on this list is the oldest on the list. Wait, what? You guys know that I'm a fairly contemporary reader. I don't read a lot of older backlist titles. You guys know that I'm a pretty contemporary reader. There's not a ton of books I talk about that were published, before the 90s. But this next book is the oldest one on this list. I think it was published in the late 90s. It is Intensity by Dean Koontz. This is the story of a young woman named China. She's a college student. And for the holiday, she decides to go home with one of her friends from college. She's uncomfortable enough and unsettled enough in this new place with these new people that she's up late one night when a man breaks into the home while everyone is sleeping and kills everybody in the house, not knowing that China is there temporarily. And so what ensues is her initially trying to save the family that she's staying with, and then discovering that this killer is also holding a young girl, preteen. I'm pretty sure she's pretty young. And so at that point, China decides that she needs to save this girl. Holy cow. So this book is appropriately named. It is intense. It will probably go down in history for me as the most suspenseful book I've ever read. I did reread it after starting BookTube, and it didn't work for me the same way that it did before, because it trades that much on the suspense and the unknown aspects of the story. At any moment, this girl could be caught and killed. At any moment, it's just so crazy. So, and it's probably a little bit too much for some people. I don't know. But if you think that unimaginable amount of suspense in a book sounds like a good time, I would highly recommend Intensity by Dean Koontz. He's a tough reader to read. He's a tough author to read, not gonna lie. I used to read him a lot when I was a teenager, and I don't have the capability now, which is crazy. I've never read another book like it, and for that reason, it is, in my opinion, a pretty unique thriller. Next is actually two books, and I'm lumping them together because they're by the same author, The Stillwater Girls and The Memory Watcher, which are both written by Minka Kent. This is also interesting because I didn't really like either of these. I was so disappointed in The Stillwater Girls and only liked The Memory Watcher a little bit more, but that's not what this is about. This is about originality and being unique, and Minka Kent's thrillers are definitely that to me. I find them unique. Minka Kent always includes some outrageous twist. I mean, twists that you'll never see coming because there's like a 0.01% chance that they would ever happen in the natural world. Like crazy twists. Now, that is not for me. I don't enjoy thrillers like that because I like to outthink my authors. I like to figure out where a book is going. And when Minka Kent throws in such an unusual twist one could never predict, then I usually end up pretty mad about it. But these books are rated really highly. I mean, there are people out there, I know that there are thriller readers out there who don't want to be able to guess, who get bored if they can guess the twists and the revelations that come in books. And I get it. I think The Stillwater Girls has like a 4.1 rating on Goodreads, and people love that book. There are booktubers that I could tell you about right now that love that book. I didn't like it because of the twist, because of how outrageous the twists are. But there are people who love that. And I've never read any other author with twists this preposterous, with twists that there's no way you would ever guess ever. Granted, those kinds of books aren't anything that I would knowingly pick up. But if you want something that will definitely take you by surprise, grab a thriller from Minka Kent. Next is a book I haven't talked about often, though I did talk about it after I read The Ark. That book is Rewind by Catherine Ryan Howard. This is the story of an Instagram influencer who goes to stay at this small group of cottages in Ireland. Unbeknownst to her, the manager of those cottages spies on the guests via hidden camera. And one night while he's watching the camera, someone sneaks into our influencer's room and kills her and destroys the camera. Upon reports of this missing influencer, a journalist wants the scoop, and so she heads to these cottages to try to solve the mystery of what happened to the influencer, and this was the last known place that she was. Not altogether an original idea, I'll give you that. But again, the book's appearance on this list is based entirely on execution. The book is called Rewind because this book is not told in chronological order. Each chapter of the book starts with the actions, rewind, pause, play, etc., in order to plant the reader at the place and time relevant to what they're about to read. And that's super interesting to me and kind of original in printed form. I think, thanks to films like Memento, it's kind of become more popular in visual medias. But this book, I'm not going to say that it's all over the place and it's chaos. It's not. I mean, it's just very cleverly pieced together, all based around, specific points in time and the play on a recorded video, not unlike the hidden camera. I mean, it's just kind of clever to me. It's a clever concept and a really ambitious way to put the book together, I think. So if you're willing to read a story that's been told before, but to read it in an interesting way, then I would suggest reading Rewind by Catherine Ryan Howard. And this is also a thriller that takes place in Ireland, which isn't unheard of, but it's definitely a lot less common than reading one set in the United States or one in England, etc. So next on this list is a book that I don't hear a ton of people talking about on BookTube, but one that I did really enjoy. It is Watch Me by Jody Gurman. This is the story of a creative writing professor named Kate who is experiencing a pretty low point in her life. Her writing career has sort of tanked. Her husband has left her, and she's just wading through her existence. Teaching these creative writing courses and trying to rekindle her own creativity. Enter a student of hers called Sam. And Sam writes really dark and intense fiction that catches Kate's eye. She wants to sort of nurture his talent, grow him into the successful writer that she believes he can become. Unbeknownst to her, Sam is not simply a creative writing major in college. Sam has been obsessed with author Kate since the release of her first book. And everything that he has done since he read that book was to get him to the point where he could be close to Kate. Not only does he get close to her in a professor-student sort of way, but Kate actually finds herself developing feelings for this creative and promising individual. And the closer that she gets to Sam, the more her life is in danger. For me, what sets this book apart from other thrillers is Sam's narrative, which is told in second person. So we get Kate's perspective, sure, but then we also get Sam, and everything Sam says is directed towards you, as if he's speaking directly to Kate. And as such, the reader is almost accosted by these really pervasive and intense thoughts and desires that Sam has. Some would argue that first person is maybe the most personal and intimate of the points of view, but I kind of disagree because I love certain stories told to me in first person, but they could be being told to anybody. I don't necessarily feel like the character speaking is always honest. Whereas in second person, the character speaking is specifically addressing who they intend to address. And they're saying things that they would only say to that person. If that person is the reader, okay, great. If it's, in this case, the object of his obsession, it's extremely intimate. If Sam told us this story in first person, he might not say the things to us that he would say thinking he was only speaking to his obsession. I do have a small disclaimer for this book, just something I've got to throw out there when we're talking about originality. And that is, when I read this book, a lot about this book seemed to fit into things that people were saying about the book You by Carolyn Kepnes, which I still have not read. So it could not, it may not be original. It may be a lot like You, but still, I don't know a ton of thrillers that use second person anyway. So maybe if you've never read one, Watch Me would be a good place to start if you're looking for something unusual. Next on this list is a book called Temper. This is by Lane Fargo. I also read this as an ARC. And it's unique because if there could ever be such a thing as slow burn thriller, Temper would be it. This is the story of three people. A theater actress named Kira, who lands a highly coveted role in a new production. Malcolm, who is the writer and director of that production and co-owner of the theater in which the production will take place. And the other owner of the theater, Joanna, who has worked alongside Malcolm for years. The story is kind of hard to explain. I mean, Malcolm has a reputation for being a really demanding and captivating and dangerously charming kind of director. And while Kira is convinced that she has enough strength of character to handle Malcolm's demands, an odd competition begins between Joanna, who's used to Malcolm's attention, and Kira, who becomes Malcolm's sole focus. I still don't really know what to make of this book. It can't be classified as anything else but psychological thriller. However, what I said is true. It's so slow building. Instead of having an action-packed sort of experience, what you have is just tiny grains of sand in this story piling one on top of the other until the whole thing just bursts out. I don't think that this story is for me, but I can appreciate some of the things that the story does. It's told very similarly to a stage play would be told. This book is intense. This book is dark and kind of contemplative, and it really does a number on you psychologically as you're reading it. You know, this push and pull and the tension building up until you can't take it anymore as the reader. It's a really unique reading experience. It's a really uniquely told thriller. And I think people who are fans of the theater scene could really appreciate it. I think people who like intense and kind of dark, erotic undertones. There's nothing too overt in this book, really. Nothing really shocking to anyone who reads adult fiction. Kind of does a number on you. It's pretty good. Where intensity is so suspenseful you can't stand it, this book has the same sort of intense effect on you, but completely apples and oranges. They're two totally different books, and it's just crazy. It's crazy. Speaking of erotic, the last book that I've read that I feel is worthy of mentioning on a list of unique thrillers is really the entire Deanna Madden series by A.R. Torrey, but specifically The Girl in 6E. I talk about this book on occasion. This is an erotic thriller about a woman who is so overcome with the desire to murder people that she locks herself in an apartment for years. She has everything that she could possibly need to survive delivered to the door. She makes money by being an internet cam girl. And one of her clients actually reveals enough information to her that she starts to suspect that her client is going to kill someone, or that her client is holding someone against their will. And at that point, she has to determine how safe it is for her to go out there in the world. Will she kill people while she's trying to save someone? This is a totally unique book in concept. I don't know of any book that begins with that premise. So I think it's unique in that regard. It's also a little unique because it is an erotic thriller, which, don't get me wrong, is not unheard of. It's not like you can't find any of those. But this one was a very popular erotic thriller, and to some people it's gratuitous and unnecessary. To others, it's a perfectly natural part of a story that's about a cam girl. To me, it just really stands out. It is a trilogy. There are 3 books, and I loved the first one and loved the last one. The middle one, I could kind of take it or leave it. You could totally read just The Girl in 6E as a standalone, as a introduction to this world of Deanna Madden, and decide if you'd probably decide really quickly if you could take it or not. If you could get on board with this type of story or not. But I think that it's original. It's certainly original, and therefore, deserves a spot on this list. So that's what I can offer you in terms of unique or original mystery thrillers that I have read. That said, there are a few books on my radar that I haven't read yet that I can't vouch for these books 100% because I haven't read them. But I just want to tell you about them because to me, they sound like perfect candidates for this list. And they're all on my TBR. First is a book called After She Wrote Him. This is by Solari Gentle. This is the story of a woman named Madeline who's writing her next novel, and she becomes increasingly interested in this character that she has developed named Edward. And she's written him as this charming yet dark and charismatic character. She finds herself thinking about him quite often, and he is also a writer. Here's the thing about Edward. Edward is busy writing his next literary novel, and he becomes obsessed with his new protagonist, Madeline. Do you see where this is going? So as the reader, we have no idea which character is real and which character is fictitious. They are both seemingly writing the story of the other's lives. Enter a killer and a death, and things supposedly get crazy. So this has been on my radar for quite a while. I was actually awarded an arc of this book that I have been unable to get to, which is going to translate into me buying the book in order to support the author because I suck as a human being. So there's that. But since I heard about it, I've been deeply fascinated by this concept and super excited to dive in and see if I can navigate the pieces of the puzzle that the author is presenting. At the same time, I'm kind of afraid to dive in because I also feel like it could be really intense, confusing, and almost drive me a little bit insane. But I think it sounds incredibly unique. And that was what attracted me to the story in the first place. Next on this list of my suspected and anticipated interesting and unique thriller list, whatever, is the book called My Sister, the Serial Killer. I recently hauled this book. It is by Oyinkan Braithwaite. It is the story of a girl who lives in Nigeria, knows that her sister is killing the men that she dates, and is in fact helping her sister get away with it when her sister targets her own crush. I've heard a lot of great things. A lot of booktubers have talked very highly about My Sister the Serial Killer, and not only does it sound like a premise that I've never encountered before, but the book also takes place in Nigeria and it's written by an African author. And while that may not be unique or original, I feel like it's probably a departure for most of us. It's probably an opportunity to read a book set somewhere that we've never read before, to read a book by an author who hails from a country that we've never read from before. It'll definitely be a first for me and an original experience for me, and it very well could be to you as well. Finally, on my TBR, something that I think will turn out to be pretty unique and original is the book Before I Go to Sleep. This is by S.J. Watson. This book came out in, I think, 2011. It's the story of a woman who has essentially lost her ability to record new memories. And so every night when she goes to sleep, her memory is erased. She wakes up. She doesn't recognize the man laying next to her or where she is. She doesn't recognize her own face in the mirror. And she gets through life with the help of her husband, the help of her neurologist, and the things that she leaves for herself before she knows she won't remember anything the next morning. That includes, highly organized methods of keeping notes and even writing in a journal that she keeps hidden away in her closet. The problem with Christine's situation is that she can never be 100% sure that everyone in her life is telling her the truth. She notices while reading her journal that inconsistencies are starting to pop up in the things that she's written about, and stuff is not adding up or making sense. And so, do the people in her life have the best intentions, etc.? This is a book of mixed reviews, but I mean, it's got a lot of them. So, it's fairly popular and has been out for a while. I just think that it sounds terrifying. Hopefully it does turn out to be a reading experience for me that I haven't had before. For now, that's all suspicion on my part, but I have high hopes. I have high hopes for this book. So there you have it. There's a decent sized list of mystery thriller books that I think are unique and original, and even 3 that I've never read that I'm going to go out on a limb and say sound unique and original. Let me know what some of your most unique reading experiences have been, especially if they're in the mystery thriller genre, so we can pass some of those books on to anyone who might be looking for something different. Also, if you heard me mention a book on this list as being unique and original and you think it's not because you know of 8,000 books that are like it, let me know that too. Not because I want you to prove me wrong, but because chances are if I liked it, I'm going to want to read more books like it. And I'll just have to admit that I had no idea what I was talking about when I called it unique and original. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all very soon.